Hi, this is Elizabeth Hancock, host of the Great Awakening podcast. So, last week we talked about the runes found underneath the Bosnian Pyramids. This week we're going to do a sort of part two where we're going to be looking a little bit more closely at the Bosnian Pyramids. And in particular, I want to focus on timeframes of when this might have happened. When was the cosmic gate closed? And also look at who may have come here. So, last week we talked about the Bosnian Pyramids and how the runes told us that the gate has been closed. We are at a standstill. We will have to defend ourselves and conquer until the cosmic gate is opened again. So, we found out that the cosmic internet, as Sam Osmajic calls it, that links the Bosnian Pyramids with the sun, which is either a portal or maybe even a spacecraft that is stationed there. In fact, many researchers believe that there are spacecraft, even motherships, stationed out in the cosmos in our solar system, especially around places like Ganymede and Jupiter. And these motherships are often called arks, and they are said to be absolutely huge. In the ancient texts, they talk about how these arks could hold thousands and thousands of people. So we can imagine how large they are. This, in fact, reminds me of Billy Carson's film, The Black Satellite, which tells us about the supposed spacecraft, which NASA says is space junk, that has been stationed there for around 10,000 years. This also seems to link up to the same time period as the Great Flood, which we're going to come to in a minute. But it's interesting that this black satellite is there. What is it? Who is it? Is it really space junk? Could these even be the Watchers who are watching over the planet for whatever reason that may be as well? And could this realm, world, or planet, whatever we want to call it, just be one massive experiment, as so many researchers are saying? Well, I don't like to think of myself as being an experiment, so I haven't quite got there with my thinking yet. And I'm looking at other avenues of possibilities, but I'm always open to discussion, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that. We also learned last week that the crystal lined tunnels underneath the pyramids, which magnify the energy, whilst the sacred symbols that are also found there enhance it even more, creating a strong field that can carry messages or information out into the cosmos or up to the mothership. So, is the cosmic gate maybe open again? There are certainly many who believe that we now have spacecraft in our solar system, which does seem to indicate that the cosmic gate has been opened again. And Earth, if you like, has now been opened back up with the galaxy, and it is now attracting many, many different spacecraft coming in from other sides of the galaxy who have not been able to come here for thousands of years. And we'll look in a minute why this may be. So let's look at some other sacred sites or other pyramids in our world to try and get an understanding of dates. First of all, we know that the Bosnian pyramids are around 30,000 years old. And just like Göbekli Tepe, they were filled in. The tunnels underneath the pyramid have been filled in with mud, seeming to indicate that this was done by someone or something, and it was done for a reason, maybe to protect what was in there. Maybe this was to close down the crystal lined tunnel so that they would not be able to communicate with space, with the spacecraft, whatever that may be. And we can then know that this was after 30,000 years ago. Now, Göbekli Tepe is said to have been built around 9,700 BC, based on radiocarbon dating of the earliest exposed structures, and then covered back in around 8,000 BC. So this 8,000 BC is a very interesting date because it does seem to come back a lot. This is also the period after the Younger Dryas, and the Younger Dryas is said to be the time when Atlantis sank, and then 8,000 BC is supposed to be when civilization was kickstarted again. So we also have the black satellite we talked about before, which is said to have been in the sky for 10,000 years. That again is 8,000 BC, seeming to indicate that something has been there since 8,000 BC. So 8,000 BC is the beginnings of civilization in our world. And although it's said to be when civilization began, I think most of us now know that this is a time when it re-began. as there are just too many artifacts, ancient technologies, sacred sites, indigenous texts, stories, many, many myths and legends that all talk about time periods before this and how advanced they were. The previous civilization was most likely wiped out by a huge flood, as we can see evidence of this everywhere. We also have mud deposits, ice melting in Greenland, shells on mountain tops, Tibetan texts which talk of waves being 3 miles high. The huge rise in sea levels indicates to us that it was either ice comets that landed on Earth, or maybe, as talked about in the book Planetary Intervention by Fabio Santos and Ted Hike, the water came from inside the Earth, where we already know that there is a lot of water housed or stored. In fact, scientists have been studying this inner Earth water, which is showing remarkable properties and being much higher vibrational than the water that we have coming from our ecosystem and the rain. This inner earth water has also been used to heal people. And there are still baths around where people can go and be healed, but the ones in the UK have actually been concreted back up by the military as they are deemed to be unsafe. According to Fabio Santos, the inner earth water essentially managed to escape because the Earth's crust broke. And he puts this down to the incoming of a planet, which we can call Nibiru, which Sitchin calls it, maybe Planet X, or even a dwarf planet that comes back into our solar system every 3,600 years. And as it does so, it affects the atmosphere of our planet. And as such, on one occasion, it caused a pole shift where the Earth's axis flips and south becomes north and vice versa. And we know that this has actually happened because the indigenous tribes tell us that this has happened in the past. So maybe it was the inner Earth water escaping, which then contributed to the increased sea levels that we have on our planet and the submerging of many of the ancient cities, which we can see still under the sea. If this pole shift was caused by something hitting our planet, then this could have been also what caused the pyramids to become slightly off center and leave the Bosnian pyramids more accurate, showing us that the Giza pyramids are probably older than the Bosnian pyramids. And I agree with Robert Schoch that the Egyptian pyramids are probably very old, maybe even 100,000 years old. So if we also use this same time period for the Bosnian pyramids, then let's also assume that the tunnels under the pyramids were filled in 8,000 BC too. They were possibly filled in to protect what was inside the tunnels, and maybe it was that closed the cosmic gate, because essentially what it was doing was closing the frequency, the signal that was connected to the cosmos, the sun, or a spacecraft in some way. And that certainly seems to be what the runes are telling us, that this cosmic gate was closed. And it was closed by the tunnels being filled back in with Earth. I also feel that the huge number of artifacts that have been found and continue to be found on Earth has something to do with it as well. Many of these artifacts are probably advanced technology, maybe even altering the holographic field in a way that we don't understand yet. For example, the Mies, or tablets of destiny, that were also described as power stones. So could have been crystals or such like. There are now so many artifacts being retrieved and discovered in the earth, indicating that now these artifacts are able to be put back into the world again. This tells me that the matrix has been dismantled and the earth is now back open, and the benevolent, or celestials as they were called in our ancient texts, are able to get back in. We probably don't understand the technologies that they are able to use. The Dogon tribe talk of being visited by the Numus, but say they haven't been here for 100 years. Is this because they weren't able to come here, as the world has been under a siege of some sort? So we've now backtracked to 8000 BC, possibly being the time period when the cosmic gate was disconnected from the cosmic internet. The Book of Zion, which contains the oldest records from Sanskrit, states that after the Great Deluge, a serpent race redescended, indicating that they were already here, from the skies and began teaching mankind. I suspect it's no accident that so many of our laws, money, and debt systems and societal structures can be traced back to this same time period, 8000 BC, where they literally just sprang up from nowhere. The Sumerians probably inherited their laws from advanced people that descended to Earth to help us if the Book of Zion is true, or maybe to control us, depending on which way you look at it. They kick-started humanity again, but they created their world on this planet. Has this been helpful to us as a race, as a species? I'm not so sure. And I suspect that this is the reason why all of these laws and hierarchies are being dismantled now, because they were never ours. And we are now free to decide which laws we want to take on as a humanity and as a collective ourselves. This book also says that the fifth civilization were these serpents, the serpents who redescended from the sky, whilst the fourth civilization were the giants who were wiped out by the great deluge. As we talked about last week in the giant episode, there is certainly a ton of evidence to show that giants walked this earth in vast quantities. But interestingly, we're still here up until the 1800s. So either they weren't all wiped out, or they multiplied again after the Great Flood. Giant DNA is even in our DNA, as I talked about last time. So it seems that we also lived alongside the giants, which is what our myths and legends tell us too. According to the Book of Zion, these serpent beings had human faces and long dragon tails and founded the divine dynasties, which means the rulers that follow on each generation. The kings and the queens rule by bloodline. So they founded these bloodlines that take us up to the modern day. The Chinese emperors say that they are descendants of a serpent or dragon lineage dated back to 7,000 years ago, 5,000 BC. The Indian Vedas talk of the Nagas or Dravidians, who were the product of interbreeding between these serpents and humans, resulting in a dark-skinned, flat-nosed, cannibalistic being. The Nagas were described as intelligent reptiles that could fly. So if we consider the Chinese emperors who state that their dragon lineage goes back 7,000 years ago, this takes us back to 5,000 BC. And there are certainly many researchers who state that reptilians have been here for 6,000 to 7,000 years. But there is another theory. The author-researcher, Dr. Michael Salla, recently stated that he believes that the moon was brought into our atmosphere. And it was this that caused the global flood, affecting gravity and the atmosphere, as the moon is on the outer layers of the atmosphere, known as exosphere, and so the moon would have affected the water on the planet. However, this doesn't explain the huge rise in sea level after the flood, which the crashing of ice comets into the Earth does explain. We also have the Bible and the Sumerian accounts, which say that the global flood was caused on purpose to wipe out deprived people or the Nephilim giants. There are many versions, but the reality is that the scribes at that time would not have understood any of the more scientific versions of what really happened, and we are left with the overly edited and indoctrinated biblical accounts, which have all derived from Sumerian accounts, and possibly were altered along the way as a way to control people. So if we look at 8,000 BC as being the kickstarting of civilization, and the redescending of a serpent race arriving onto the earth and teaching humanity, then we can see that this is possibly the same time when the cosmic gate was closed. We also have another ancient book which talks of Adam and Eve essentially being a reptilian mammal hybrid, which is interesting. And I think this is why many researchers talk about us having a reptilian brain, because that was our original form, that we were originally saurons. Okay, so we'll come back to them in another episode. But for now, thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.